everybody. My name is Jason Piercey, and this is Out of the Fog. An interesting and important one for you tonight. Of course, there's a lot of uncertain times right now. Are we going to be in another state of an emergency? The kids are home from school. Are you going a little bit crazy? I know I'm going to. So we decided that we would have a free-form, open conversation about how to help with maybe some mental health-related issues that could happen across this tumultuous time. So from Channel, we have Monica Fletcher who's going to join us, and we also have Sam Picco who's going to join us, and because, I mean, she's got lots of mental health issues. Anyway, this will be a whole lot of fun. We'll be right back after this. And welcome back, everyone, to Out of the Fog. Okay, quick introductions. Monica Fletcher from Channel. Yes. And Sam Picco from, well, I mean, lots of places.
From Newfoundland.
From Newfoundland, from CBS. Yeah. So the reason we have this particular collection of people, Monica, you're a certified peer supporter, and you also do some management-related stuff with Channel. Yes. So just speak for a second about what Channel does, please.
So Channel is a peer support organization. We're nonprofit. We are all across the island, and we are run for and run by people with mental illnesses who are living in a good place of recovery. So
people with lived experience with mental illness, mental health issues, and addictions issues who then help other people.
Yes.
Okay. Sam, amongst a bunch of other things, you are a person who recently had a pretty fun trip to Spain, but then came home, found yourself in self-isolation because unbeknownst to you when you booked your trip, you were in a bit of a hotbed for COVID-19.
You got it.
As an update for anybody who's watching and wondering why we're just sitting here, you're clear.
Yes.
You were tested, you had the nasal swab, and all of that.
Right.
But the importance to this particular conversation is we're going to talk about how we can support people just through standard advice right now who are feeling down in the dumps because it's been a tough year, right? So your lived experience from that adds a lot of value. So to start off, Monica, before we go into social distancing and how that can affect somebody, or the impact of all of the bizarre stuff that you see on social media all the time and how it can help, can you speak a little bit as to what things that have happened this year already could have done to somebody? Because, I mean, we had a state of emergency, the weather's been horrible, the economy's been up and down, there's been political changes that are really stressful. So what is it normal for people to feel right now?
A lot of fear. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety, especially through the state of emergency that we had. People were very, very fearful. They were stuck in their houses, they couldn't get out. Now they can get out, but they shouldn't. Or, shouldn't. So there's a lot of anxiety around that and a lot of fear, and not knowing what COVID-19 is, or, you know, if they're going to catch it, if they're going to come in contact with someone. And if you have anxiety to begin with, that's going to elevate that, or any type of fear-based, you know, depression. If you're self-isolating and you're depressed and then being alone and then you're physically isolated, so that gets...
As a baseline, it's understandable for people in our local space, our local communities, because Rogers, we're a community station here. It's normal for everybody to be on high alert already. Yes. And everybody's sort of antsy, right? And it's okay if we all have a predisposition to be confused and a little worrisome right now. So let's add on top of that, you go on a vacation, Sam. And then you come home and you're like, oh, do I have the coronavirus? So, like, can you speak a little bit as to what your experience was?
Yeah.
And then, just like factually, sort of.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about what it felt like after that.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely somebody watching right now who's
in a similar
who is
situation.
self-isolated.
Yeah.
And they probably feel like they're sort of losing their mind a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I guess, you know, prior to leaving and going on my trip, there was no real, like, alert or real, like, scare in that way. It was when the latter part of the trip, when I was almost it was coming to a close, that these, concerns came into place with it spreading in, Italy and Spain. And then I had a flight to Switzerland that got canceled. And that was huge because they couldn't actually fill the plane itself, so they canceled that flight, which for me was a blessing. It allowed me to get home 2 days earlier. And then you can see it in the airports. You saw more and more people wearing masks, not as much as I thought, but more people, like less people on the planes and that kind of stuff. So that's when it kind of hit me that I was like, I shouldn't have done this. This is not going to be good. And it wasn't until I got home that I really understood the severity of it, because when it's at such a distance and you're watching it on like CNN or like, it's not even on your, well, a little bit on your local news. It's just not so close to you that you're like, it's not really going to get to me.
And every bit of the story that you see is like, there's hundreds of people in China.
Yeah.
Or there's, so it's harder to imagine.
And I've heard of this stuff before. I mean, we've gone through things like H1N1 or SARS or these types of things before that really didn't affect me directly. So having that exposure or feeling like I could have been contaminated in some way was really, really scary. I think when you mentioned fear, I think that was really important, but I think what's happening is the information that we're being given, especially through social media, is adding to that fear. I think a lot of people are making uneducated posts or not looking deeply into it and just kind of letting it...
Not vetting the source of the information.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I had someone tell me that the coronavirus causes like you to go into convulsions, and I was like, that's not true. First of all, 80% of the cases are going to be a mild to moderate flu-like symptoms, right? Yes. So I think that's adding to the fear and the paranoia is the social media side of it.
Yeah. So when you got home and you made a decision, I mean, you own a business and you have a fair amount of staff. Right. You made a decision, I need to isolate because on the off chance that you are carrying, even though you were asymptomatic, you should give yourself some incubation time, protect the rest of the community, and go into self-isolation.
Right, yeah. So
it's perfectly understandable how you drew that conclusion. I think everybody gets that, and we would be proud of you for looking after because that was a selfless decision.
Right.
Like you,
and
it
I
would
had
have
no
been ideal.
symptoms whatsoever.
Exactly,
I felt perfectly fine.
What did it feel like to just sit at home and think like
Well, what happened was after you and I went live in our episode, I woke up really congested the next day, and so I ended up calling the nurse, and they sent nurses in to test me. So I then, not only was I self-isolating, I had the fear that I actually had the virus. So I was, honestly, I just try to keep myself busy, but it's so hard to get off the phone. I found myself just kind of constantly checking in on what the latest thing was, and then I had to lay it down because that wasn't helping me. It didn't make me feel healthy at all.
Yeah, so Monica, as she said, she was just constantly scrolling on her phone. You were like, as though this is a common thing. Can you speak to it a little?
It is very common. People are so tied to our phones anyway.
Yeah.
And then something like this comes up and you're going through all of this misinformation, which information is real and which is not. So we're suggesting, like, just stay away from the social media.
Yeah. But you're so bored at home, and you're like,
but
I didn't watch Netflix at all. I was just on my phone, like, hey.
But there's another. I understand the value in staying away from social media because you're consuming all this stuff that could lead you down the wrong path. It's kind of like the worst thing you can do when you have a baby and your baby doesn't seem to be behaving the way it nor is Google the symptoms and then figure out they're gonna die in 10 minutes because like WebMD is like it's like that. But I understand the value of pulling back from that information that way. But isn't there also a need if we're social distancing and we're putting ourselves in self-isolation, if you're at home and you're one of those people, you need to connect to others, don't you?
So use your social media to connect with friends. Maybe do some video calls or Skyping. And I heard this morning a friend of mine was planning a party. I was invited, and we're all just going to meet on Zoom.
Oh, yeah, that's nice.
That's fun. I like that.
Yeah,
that's
like a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and we're all just going to meet on Zoom and hang out.
Yeah, that's
virtually.
Cool. That's a good idea.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
I really do.
So you can use social media. It's not all evil, so you can use it for good as well. You just kind of got to think outside the box.
But it's the incessant scrolling and the consumption.
That's hard, yeah. And the news watching. And the news watching. For my mental health, I gave up watching the news about 15, 20 years ago. and I found I was just getting so depressed.
And triggered by the negativity.
Yeah, very much, very much. So for my mental health, I just had to stop because bad news sells. So that's what they're going to sell us is the bad news.
Stuff.
Exactly, exactly. So I don't watch the news. And I know a lot of people kind of come back at me with, but you have to stay informed. I can stay informed without watching 12 news shows a day or reading the newspaper all the time or being on Facebook and looking up things. I don't need to know absolutely everything that's going on there.
So Channel has a warm line.
We do.
The warm line is it's an opportunity for somebody who's struggling with mental health, mental illness, or addiction issues. They can reach out and just speak to a peer supporter live.
Yes.
Is that kind of how it works?
Yes. I will caveat that with any type of challenge, any type of struggle.
Good.
We all have our junk. We all have our junk, and people might be finding that this is the last straw that kind of is adding to their weight, and it's making them feel now they're going downhill a little bit. You know, maybe you just broke up with somebody. Maybe there's all kinds of things that happen in people's lives that you can call, reach out, and speak to a peer supporter. There's several peer supporters that we have in the life experience between us. We've been there. We've been there. We've seen it.
That's what I love about this is that everyone that works with you has gone through something. Right? How many times do you hear, well, what have you gone through in your life that you can offer me advice through what I'm going through? I think that's huge.
Yes, and it is huge. And I wish they had it back when I was first sick. One of my counselors, they sent me to a nun. And I thought, well, what can you tell me as a young 20-something woman in a marriage with small children who now has depression? She didn't have the lived experience.
Exactly, and I don't want to be insensitive about it. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I mean, the nun is going to tell you to pray for your wellness. But I mean...
And as a spiritual person, that certainly could be a part of recovery.
But well, it's a type of meditation even.
Exactly, but for me it was, where's your lived experience piece? How can you possibly know what I'm going through if you haven't lived through it?
So back to the warm line for a minute. Are you receiving calls now that are related to people who are anxious about current state of affairs?
Yes, and our call volume has definitely gone up. So we're not offering in-person services right now, so it's all going to be warm line based. And just to clarify, that's as a matter of creating social distance, right? Absolutely, absolutely. For the safety of our peers and the safety of our staff as well. So the warm line is open from 10 in the morning till midnight, 7 days a week. There's 2 operators. We're now going to take some of our frontline workers who do the in-person piece and put them on callbacks, because we have a message manager. So if you feel like leaving a name and number, we will call you back. So now we have 2 people for that. Also, for anybody that would like to have a session with somebody, we can make appointments for telephone sessions as well.
Awesome.
So there's, we are still offering services. They're just going to be more telephone and online related.
So related to current state of affairs, I'm just wondering if it would be possible for us to do like a real quick few minutes on frequently asked questions, sort of like what are the common things that people speak about or ask about, or the feelings that they're having, and what are some of the mechanisms to cope with it that could be delivered, just so we can say to our audience, like, if you are feeling this way that Monica is talking about, this is the kind of advice that maybe you would get. Is that something we can sort of role play a little, maybe?
Sure.
So Sam, you were locked up for a while.
Okay, so I am feeling anxious about all the information that is flooding me right now. What are ways that I can get out of my own head, I guess you could say, and relax a little bit and not be so anxious about everything that's happening?
Well, it's absolutely understandable that you're feeling that way. I mean, anxiety is definitely going to be a part of it. Some of the things that we talk about with people is maintain your daily routine as much as you can. Self-care is as much about those daily things that you do, such as making sure you get enough sleep still, making sure you're still eating healthy food, getting outside, taking a walk, not spending so much time on social media, connect with your friends. So all the things that you used to do, still do them. Still make sure that you're doing all of those self-care pieces to keep yourself healthy while you're alone.
Okay, keep on a routine. That's
Yes,
good. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And if you have any hobbies that you absolutely love doing, now's the time to do that.
For me personally, I could see myself calling to talk about what it feels like to be isolated with a small child. Because during the state of emergency, my wife and I share custody 50-50 with our little girl, but she happened to be at my place when everything got shut down. So I had her for an extended period of time. And then shortly after that, my wife got diagnosed with influenza B. So or my ex-wife rather, sorry. So she was sort of in her own kind of isolation for a little while because we couldn't have our little girl get sick like that. Right. So I've had a few stretches of that kind of experience. And if I could picture myself, if that were to happen again right now, I mean, I love my little girl to pieces. Like, she's the most important thing in my life. But I can't be cooped up with her any longer. Like, right? And now school's closed? Like, there's the pressure. So how do you help somebody reconcile that, like, I'm sick of my own kid right now, like I need space? Because there's guilt with it.
That's totally understandable as well. You're cooped up with anybody, your own child, your spouse. Can you imagine spouses now being cooped up with each other all this time?
Can't even go to work and get a break?
Right? I mean, you do. You need a break from people. I mean, that's just natural.
Yeah.
So what you're feeling is totally understandable. And not to be having any guilt over that. And maybe practicing some routine around quiet time for the both of you, some activities for the both of you, maybe some activities for her, a good time. I don't know your daughter. She might be good at entertaining herself, or she might be one of those children that constantly needs that attention. I had one of those. That was
I'm that person.
That was her.
You really, really are.
Tell me you love me.
It was, and I needed. I probably got her to bed a little bit earlier than the other children because I needed that break. Like, I needed that mental break from constantly having to be on, plus that physical break from constantly being touched and tugged at and, all of that sort of stuff. You need that break. You have to have it,
And another thing that I noticed, because I actually went through this, and I don't mind being honest with our audience here, like I'll sit down most evenings and have a glass of wine or two, the majority of evenings. But I noticed that, like, that glass of wine was with supper now. And then there was more later. Or it's easy to be like, what time can I get away with a glass of wine right now? Like, and that's a very, very...
That's okay.
It's true. It's a very, very real thing. But you need to monitor that line, because that can spin into a bad place really quick.
It can. All I would say about using substances to cope is it's risky. That's it. So you have to know yourself.
Self-awareness is what I was just about to say.
I gave myself a rule a few years ago around alcohol. That and it actually came from a Reese Witherspoon movie. I don't remember what the movie was. If anybody knows
Legally Blonde.
It might have been Legally Blonde. It was pretty simple. I only drink to feel even better.
I've heard that before, yes.
So,
because you can never drink to feel better if you're depressed.
Exactly.
But to feel even better.
I live with anxiety and ADHD, so my rule is if I'm not in a good place, I don't drink.
Absolutely. That's a good rule.
It's
I
simple,
like that.
right?
Yeah.
So,
A lot of people aren't able to make that real conscious choice, though. A lot of times it is something that helps people when they're in a bad place, even though it is a depressant.
Yeah.
So I think the self-awareness is huge.
So call the warm line. This is how I'm feeling right now.
I want to drink a bottle of wine, but I know it's not going to make me feel better, but I still want to do it. Are there alternatives for me? Go for a walk,
we get
eat something healthy. Yeah.
Yeah, we do get those calls from people.
How do you walk somebody through that?
We talk a lot about, what they're feeling right now, and that it's understandable. It's what you're going through at the time. Are there better coping strategies? What has worked for you in the past? Can you bring that forth now and have that help you now? That doesn't include that. What happens? You know, basically we just ask questions. What happens when you drink a lot? Well, I wake up really depressed in the morning. Do you want to wake up depressed in the morning?
Is it worth it?
Exactly. Is it worth it? So it's just asking questions that help people decide for themselves what it is they want to do in the end. I don't tell people what to do. I don't give advice unless you're my friend. then you're getting an earful. That's a different thing.
I'm definitely getting a message on Facebook later today. Like, Jason, how much wine have you had?
Back to that.
Just a couple of bottles.
But I think people appreciate that real talk, though. Even though you maybe save that just for your friends, I think I would appreciate that real hard conversation. Maybe the stuff that I don't necessarily want to hear.
I'll give you that.
But I need to hear.
And there is some of that as well. Usually by the end of a phone call, I hear laughter coming from the warm line room. And if I can end a call in laughter, or even just having someone feel a little bit better, that's it.
How does that feel? I'm in despair, and when the conversation is over, we're chuckling together. Like, how do you feel when that happens? I mean, are there words for that?
I'd say like on a high.
It is.
I just relate that to my own life, and you're like on a high.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah.
It is. It's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I get to do this.
Yeah.
I can't believe that I can take, I'm all of a sudden getting emotional. I can't believe I can take all the junk that happened to me in my life, the illnesses that I live with, that I had to raise my children with, and be able to use it now as insight to help other people. Like, that is
amazing.
A privilege.
I'm getting it too.
I know. I haven't been out of hug.
If not for all this COVID-19 stuff, I'll be giving you some bloody big hugs right now. Oh, okay. Real quick summation. Everybody take a breath. Just overall blanket advice to people who are feeling fear and anxiety and worry over what's happening right now.
Reach out.
Yeah.
Reach out. Whether it's, we do have the mental health crisis line. We do have the warm line. You do have video messaging on Facebook, and you have Skype. You have all those things, friends that you can talk to. There's also Bridge the Gap, which is a website for people that are dealing with depression, anxiety. They have online therapy. They have all kinds of wonderful things and suggestions that you can do to help yourself through all of this. Reach out, and don't be ashamed that you have to reach out. Everybody has to reach out. Strength is not trying to push through without help. Real strength is knowing when to ask for help.
That's great.
And that's...
Yeah. I feel like now is a really good time. Of course, we spent some time together at a channel event just a little while ago. I think now is a really good time before we go to break for me to tell a quick story to the audience. Mr. John Hagee, who is the Minister of Health and Community Services, he told a story one time about how he remembers when there was a stigma surrounding cancer. And people were ashamed to admit that they had cancer, and they wouldn't talk about it. And there was this big, heavy stigma. And when the stigma got removed, we finally started curing cancer. So it is in your best interest as somebody who's having a hard time in a tumultuous scenario to not be afraid to reach out, because removing that stigma is exactly how you get better. We'll be right back after this. And welcome back to Out of the Fog. I think you will agree with me that this has not only been an interesting and sometimes emotional conversation, it's an incredibly important conversation. All throughout the episode this evening, we've heard of people's personal experiences, and we've also heard that there are places you can go and people you can talk to, and that it's okay to feel the way that you feel, because we really do have something very important happening, and that has a lot of magnitude, and we're all here for each other. So you'll be able to find information on how you can call Channel's Warm Line, how you can make your appointments. All of this is available to you. You can see it here on this episode. Get on the Google machine. Everybody is there to help you. Removing that stigma is how you get better. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.